Hello and welcome to Comprehension Points Video Snark. I read bad books so that you don't have to. I'm continuing my read-through of Fury by Elizabeth Miles. Not the first video, go check out the others. Links are posted below. The following video might be difficult for some viewers. If you are struggling with suicidal thoughts, please reach out. People care about you. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 800-273-8255. Chapter 3. The chapter opens up again with Emily. She's musing about Zach, her best friend's boyfriend. She seems to be under the impression that he's into her, but kind of wants a bigger sign before she makes a move on him. And then... I thought that I'd seen it all when it came to peak cringe. Until this. Perhaps I'll get lucky and some girl will win a piece of the fountain, he said, invoking his rarely used nickname, the Fountain of Nerdiness. I have a question. Is there an actual reason behind this, or does the author simply think that there are people out there who talk and act like this? But Emily is so hyper-focused on getting into Zach's pants that she doesn't even give a hoot about her so-called friend JD. They get to the party where Emily scans all of the cars parked outside, but inside Emily senses that things are kind of off. Not that Gabby seems to care despite being the source of the offness at the party. As she dragged Em towards the kitchen and the punch, she chattered about her forthcoming family trip to Spain and Mallorca. It's not like Gabby was in the group talking about starting up a grief support group at the end of the last chapter. Nope, let's talk about my upcoming trip, because priorities. The two girls go over to Zach. At least Emily has the decency to know that her feelings for Zach are terrible. Did you miss me? Without giving him the chance to respond, Gabby barreled ahead. Not as much as you're gonna miss me next week. I know that the entire point of this series is that revenge aspect, but holy guacamole, the author could have toned this down several notches and gotten her point across just fine. Zach warns that somebody is on the prowl for a date to that football feast mentioned in Chase's chapter. Gabby will not stop talking about what she's going to wear, but then because the author apparently doesn't know how to stop talking about clothes, she then gives us what Emily would wear to the feast. If she was invited. I get it. I love fashion too, but damn, there's a line between she was wearing a ball gown and she looked divine and 15 paragraphs talking about skirt lengths. And then, after talking about underage drinking and how much Emily is lusting after her friend's boyfriend and an entire half a page about Gabby's feast dress, does the narration remember Sasha. At this point, Sasha legit feels like a side note with how little emphasis has been put on her. As I said a moment ago, Gabby is so self-absorbed that she's more interested in her vacation and dresses. She tried to kill herself by jumping off the piss pass, Gabby said, trying to disguise a small hiccup. Maybe it was just because she was drunk, but Gabby seemed to be almost enjoying telling this story like she was on a stage performing. Even when Gabby is talking about somebody else, she somehow manages to make the conversation about Gabby. Gabby goes on to say that they're starting up a collection to get Sasha a get-well-soon present, but Emily is more focused on how bad she feels about Sasha. While she didn't actively participate in Sasha bashing, she enabled the behavior of others by letting them continue to bully the girl. The conversation had moved on. The girls were done with Sasha. So tragic, Gabby sighed, and they started talking about the behemoth, a new giant shopping center being erected out near the highway. This is probably going to be the catchphrase for this series, because priorities. Also, erected. Is that seriously the word that you want to use right there? Are you sure? This year's Christmas shopping had still taken place at the old mall, which hadn't been renovated since the 1980s. Oh no, not the 1980s decor. They say that like it's nothing but the decor and that the stores themselves aren't going to be full of the normal modern clothing. But Emily at least has enough humanity to feel upset over the news about Sasha. She goes to find JD, who had also just heard about it. Emily says she feels weird over the entire thing, like she wants to cry, but that she isn't sure if that would be appropriate or not, considering how little the shit she'd cared about Sasha until this moment. JD asks if she wants to leave, but Emily says no, that nobody else is making a big deal about Sasha, so why should they leave? But JD points out that Emily looks pale, so they can just slip out the back. Emily goes upstairs to get her coat, but runs into Zach. They talk for a moment, and the entire thing is loaded with so much sexual innuendo that I'm not sure if I'm physically able to can. Emily isn't quite sure what Zach's meaning is, though. He then presents her with one of her earrings, which he says that she'd lost downstairs, but then they're interrupted by Gabby coming in. Zach says that Gabby is wasted and that she should go home now, so Emily starts trying to find Gabby's coat too. As she does this, she randomly thinks about another one of the outcast crowd that people made fun of simply because he was low-hanging fruit. Like, unless this guy is going to be relevant to the plot, I really don't give a hoot. But Emily can't find Gabby's coat, so Zach is forced to loan her his while they get into the car. Emily and JD start to head out, but come across Chase as he's walking to his car. Zach had warned that Chase had been drinking earlier, so they ask him if he needs a ride, but he insists that he's fine, despite Emily's protests. They continue on their way until JD almost hits a group of 3 girls. Emily exclaims about it, but JD is like, "What girls?" And when Emily looks back, the girls are gone. Chapter 4. As you might have guessed, this chapter jumps back to Chase. He goes back to his car determined to be alone. He is a little drunk, but he knows that he'd honestly rather just sit in his car and sober up rather than to be in the car with Emily and JD. As he walks, he thinks about when the police officer came to the house to tell them about the death of his father. However, since Daddy Dearest loved to hit Chase's mother, Chase often felt like the workplace accident was a bit of karmatic justice. He had parked away from the party so that nobody else would see the beat-up old car that he drives. As he goes past some of the neighboring houses, he sees that they're completely dark, and then he thinks that it's no wonder nobody ever calls the police, because nobody is around to hear. As he's fumbling for his key, the same 3 girls that JD almost hit, but didn't see at the end of the previous chapter approach Chase. They introduce themselves as Ty, Meg, and Allie. Ty tells him that their car is out of gas and asks if he could take one of them to the nearest gas station. If you will remember, Chase went to the party with the hopes of at least hooking up with a hot girl, but mainly to find a date for the football feast. However, the news of Sasha killed everybody's good mood, and hooking up had been the last thing on Chase's mind. However, he's suddenly eager to be in the presence of not 1 but 3 of the most beautiful women he's ever seen. He views it as fate, in fact. Ty rides in the car with him while Allie and Meg wait behind in their own car. As they're going, Ty asks Chase if there was a party. She starts to talk about the parties of old times, more like from the Regency era. She also starts talking about poetry. And then she asks Chase what those sirens were about earlier. He lies and says that he doesn't know, but that a lot of people don't know how to drive in the snow, so maybe there was an accident. "Nothing's ever really an accident," Ty said, once again smiling at him. Her eyes glittered cat-like. "Don't you think?" Creepy. I love it. They get to the gas station. Ty fills up a container and they drive back to where Meg and Allie are waiting with their own car. Chase then decides to be a creep, but I honestly don't know what I was expecting. "You can repay me, you know." He leaned forward, closing the distance between them, hoping she'd ignore his total lack of game and kiss him. Ugh. Ty then hands him a random red flower, which he doesn't know where she could have gotten. He tries to ask for her number, but she insists that they'll see each other again soon. Chase goes back to his own car as if hypnotized. He starts to drive off, but then slams on the brakes as something randomly occurs to him. He could have sworn that the girls were pouring gas not into the tank, but into the back, as if to burn it instead. But then he keeps going regardless. The girls had already driven off anyway, and although the narration didn't come out and say this, what in the world is Chase supposed to do about it? Track them down in the increasingly heavy snowfall? Act 2. Are we seriously doing this after literally 4 chapters? Chapter 5. When Emily wakes up the next morning, she sees the stuffed zebra Zach had given her. She thinks about how he'd been openly flirting with her the night before, but despite being happy because this was literally what she wanted to happen, she's instead filled with doubts about Zach's motives. Gabby calls to say a final goodbye, and because the author doesn't know how to shut up about clothes, Gabby chatters about a bikini for way too long. But she also complains about her missing jacket, although she insists that she put it on the bed, not the closet, and no way anybody would dare take it. Emily then spends the rest of the day jumping whenever her phone chimes with a new message, but it's never Zach. He finally does text her and asks her what she wants for Christmas. She says a puppy, if anybody's interested, and if this is relevant to the plot. He says that he'll let her see her soon. Emily is just so happy about the prospect of hanging out with Zach without Gabby. The next day is Christmas Eve, and Emily is spending the day with JD and his family. They're watching a movie when Zach asks if she wants to come over and help him hang some Christmas lights. And I feel like that's a euphemism for something. Granted, a weird one, but I think we can all guess what's going to happen when she goes over there, so maybe I'm not that off base. She goes home to get ready, but decides not to change out from her sweatpants and hoodie with the justification that they're only going to hang out, but she does put on some more makeup. At Zach's house, she watches as he hangs up some exterior Christmas lights. He says that his parents went to some charity benefit thing. They talk about Zach's family for a moment. The narration randomly tells us that Zach's biological dad randomly dropped dead on the golf course from what sounds like sudden heart failure or a possible heart attack. Zach then gives her a dog Christmas ornament, one with a Santa hat on its head. They then have a snowball fight that takes up too much time. But then he pins her up against her car and she kisses him. But as they're making out, she feels like she's being watched despite the logic part of her brain reminding her that they're alone. Zach then says that his family will be home soon, so she should go. Hope Santa doesn't find out that we've been naughty, he whispered. As Emily goes home, she finds a figure directly in front of her. She tries to swerve, but the roads are slick and icy. The car goes off the road and crashes into a low stone wall. She calls JD to say that she just drove off the side of the road and crashed, and he says that he'll be there in a few minutes. But as she hangs up, she remembers the figure, so she gets out to investigate. Instead of finding a woman, she instead finds Gabby's jacket. Instead of being weirded out that she'd find the jacket randomly on the side of the road on top of the snow, it's been snowing, so it would have been buried. Emily is just filled with guilt over lusting after her friend's boyfriend and then kissing him. As she gets back into the car, she feels something prick her in the back of her leg. She finds a red flower, which is weird given the season. She thinks Zach put it there when he disappeared for a moment during their snowball fight, but does acknowledge that it's weird that she didn't notice it until now. However, she feels kind of creeped out by the entire thing and keeps reminding herself that it's a gift from Zach. The contents of this book can be quite intense, I know. If you need help, please don't hesitate to reach out. People care about you. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 800-273-8255. Thanks for listening to my book Snark on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday, but stick around because I sometimes drop random videos on other days too. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to help me out. The first is watching this video as well as all of my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all of your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book Snarks, always free and updated every morning. And if you've already read all of my main Snarks, then you can find even more Snark on my Patreon. You can access it for $1 a month. Members also get early access to my main Tumblr Snark. Special thanks to Dawn, Phoebe, and Nikki for supporting me on Patreon already. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, you can either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my Snark so much that you want me to snark your writing? I do that too. For just $6 per chapter, I will tell you how awful that your writing is. But not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well, just 1 cent per word. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of erotic short stories and now 2 full-length novels. I also sometimes run flash sales on my stories, and if you don't follow me on any social media, you might want to do so just so you can know when I might be offering more things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. See you next week, guys!